You've been watching me from the very beginning, haven't you? I spat out, my breath tangled with tears. No. His voice was low, steady, steel wrapped in velvet, as he took a step closer. I was protecting you. I laughed, bitter, hollow, shaking. Protecting me? By canceling my ride, cleaning my house, installing cameras in my baby's room, and turning my dying mother into your debtor? Silence. Only the rain hammering against the glass. Then he moved, one step, two, and his hand caught my chin, forcing me to look up into eyes burning with something wild, barely restrained. If I wanted to own you, Ava, you wouldn't still be standing here talking. My heart stopped. In that instant, between terror and the frantic pulse in my chest, I couldn't tell if I was trembling out of fear or because of him. His hand slid lower, brushing the silver key resting against my throat. You can call it a chain, he murmured, voice rough as smoke. But to me, it's the only way to keep you safe in this world. A flash of lightning cut through the window behind him, illuminating a face both terrifying and heartbreakingly human. And in his eyes, I saw it. Beneath the power, beneath the control, a soul just as imprisoned as mine. I remember that day, summer of 2024, like a slow-motion film, every frame stained with ultimate fatigue and anxiety. Every passing moment carried an invisible weight, pulling me deeper into the abyss of exhaustion. Leo, my precious little darling, just 8 months old, was sleeping soundly on my shoulder, her warm breath caressing my neck, steady and peaceful. The scent of colostrum and baby powder from her was the only thing holding me to reality, a fragile thread amidst the chaos in my mind. I tried to keep myself awake, by counting Leo's every breath, by trying to recall my mother's scent, by murmuring the mounting debts. But my eyes kept closing, as if someone was using an invisible force, a cold hand of fate, pulling my eyelids down, inviting me into an irresistible sleep. The flight from Phoenix to Chicago O'Hare, a seemingly endless long journey, dragged me through every time zone, every lonely moment in the crowd. For an exhausted single mother like me, every mile flown was a battle. Every small sound in the airplane cabin was a test for nerves stretched taut like a violin string. I felt myself being drained, like a wilting tree in the desert, only clinging to the tiny life curled in my arms. I could not fail, could not collapse, because of Leo. Leo was the only reason I was still standing. Beside me, a strange man. He sat there, a marble sculpture in an elegant suit, without a wrinkle, without a sign of fatigue or concern. He exuded a terrifying calmness, as if time and space had to obey his will. The luxurious scent of leather, faint whiskey, and a hint of sandalwood emanating from him, a fragrance both unfamiliar and indescribably alluring, like a dangerous invitation from another world. That scent made me feel even more shabby, even more pathetic in my faded t-shirt and old jeans, with greasy, unwashed hair and dark circles under my eyes. Nicholas Moretti. That name, I vaguely heard when he exchanged tickets with the flight attendant, his voice deep and decisive. A name that sounded powerful, a name that made one think of skyscrapers, billion-dollar contracts, lavish parties that I could only see on TV. It belonged to another world, a world completely unrelated to the mounting bills on my kitchen table, unrelated to the empty refrigerator, and especially unrelated to my mother lying dying in a Chicago hospital, every breath a battle with death. I had always lived in a world of struggles, of scarcity, of difficult choices. He, with his glamour and mystery, seemed to come from another planet, a place where my worries were just distant concepts. Before takeoff, as the engine began to roar in preparation for the long journey, Leo suddenly woke up. A small, weak cry at first, but then quickly turning into a sobbing, resentful, and uncomfortable wail, as if she was sensing my tension. Her crying was like a thunderclap in my ears, making me break out in a cold sweat. In that moment, all the accumulated fatigue and anxiety suddenly erupted, making me feel completely out of control. I hastily opened my bag, fumbling and trembling to find the pre-prepared baby bottle. I knew she was hungry, but the panic made me unable to focus. My arm trembled, my fingers clutched the bottle tightly, almost spilling the milk. A warm drop of milk ran down the back of my hand, reminding me of my clumsiness and exhaustion. Suddenly, a deep, steady yet powerful voice sounded in my ear, gentle but firm, like an undeniable command. "Let me help you," he said, not looking at me, his gaze still fixed straight ahead, but his hand reached out, holding the bottle firmly, strongly, as if it was born to be in that palm. The weight of the bottle in his hand seemed lighter, steadier. I looked up, meeting his deep blue eyes, like the deep sea. A cold blue but with a strange allure, like a bottomless abyss that I feared but also longed to explore. I felt an electric current run down my spine, a feeling both strange and familiar, both chilling and safe. I didn't know what that emotion was, only that it made me suddenly forget my fatigue, forget the gnawing anxiety. He tested the milk temperature by dropping a bit onto his wrist, a natural, astonishingly skillful action, as if he had done this thousands of times. His gaze remained calm, without any emotional expression, but his gesture was incredibly gentle and thoughtful. "Just right," he said, his voice still deep and steady, carrying an unshakable certainty. "Perhaps the baby is hungry." I nodded, silently grateful. Grateful that he had recognized the obvious, which I, in my exhausted state, had been unable to think of. Grateful that he hadn't judged, hadn't pitied, but simply helped. I was too tired to think of such trivial matters, things I would normally handle with ease. Leo drank the milk contentedly. The tiny choot-choot sounds from the bottle made me feel strangely relieved, as if a large stone had just been lifted from my chest. Watching her drink her fill, I felt a rare sense of peace seep into my troubled soul. When Leo finished drinking, he gently took the bottle from my hand, placing it neatly in the crevice between the two seats, without an unnecessary sound. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice carrying a strange reassurance, as if he could soothe all worries with just a few words. "Leo seems to be fine now." His words were not a suggestion, but a gentle command, a silent concern I had longed for. I looked at him, my eyes blurred from lack of sleep, heavy as if pulled down by an invisible force. I felt myself slowly sinking into a fog of exhaustion. "I can't," I whispered, my voice hoarse, so weak that I could barely hear myself. "I need to—" I didn't need to finish the sentence. He understood. He understood that I was a single mother, always on guard, always having to be wary of everything, never allowing myself to relax, not even for a second. He understood the invisible burden I was carrying on my shoulders. "Lean on my shoulder," he said, his tone leaving no room for refusal, a gentle but powerfully persuasive firmness. "I won't go anywhere." His words were like a silent promise, an assurance in a world full of uncertainties. I hesitated. A strange man, on a long flight, in a cramped space. Should I trust him? Was it safe to place my trust in someone I knew nothing about, other than his name and that alluring scent? But the fatigue had reached its peak. It was like a demon clawing at my mind, demanding release. My eyelids were heavy. Every muscle in my body cried out for rest. Weighing innate caution against primal need, fear against desperation, I chose the latter. I leaned on his shoulder, a little awkwardly, a little reserved at first, but then completely relaxed. His shoulder was broad and steady, a shoulder I had never had since Leo was born, a support I had secretly longed for a very long time. His scent became clearer and clearer, a blend of strength and mystery, enveloping me, making me feel wrapped in a safe cocoon. I fell asleep, a deep and dreamless sleep, for the first time in many months, a sleep I never thought I would get, a sleep so good that I was afraid to wake up. When I woke up, the plane was slowly descending, the gentle change in engine sound signaling the end of the long journey. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, bathing the cabin in yellow, creating a warm scene, a complete contrast to the coldness I had felt earlier. I startled, quickly sat upright, feeling embarrassed for having fallen asleep. Leo was still sleeping soundly in my arms, her breath steady and peaceful, her face still chubby and adorable. Nicholas Moretti was still sitting there, without moving an inch, as if he had never taken his eyes off the book. He had placed a thin, soft blanket over me and Leo, a thoughtful gesture I hadn't noticed when I fell asleep. He was reading an old leather-bound book, his eyes scanning the words indifferently, as if he were reading a dry contract rather than a novel. When I stirred, he looked up, his deep blue eyes met mine, and he offered a slight smile, almost imperceptible, a smile that flashed and then vanished, leaving a hint of mystery and enchantment. "Sleep well?" he asked, his voice still deep and steady, without any change. I nodded, feeling so embarrassed I wanted to hide. I was not used to receiving help from strangers, and even less used to the concern he showed me. "Thank you," I said, my voice still sleepy and dry. I don't know what to say." My thanks seemed too small compared to what he had done for me. I felt I owed him something, an invisible debt I didn't know how to repay. His help was too great, too unexpected, making me feel confused and a little uneasy. He merely shrugged slightly, an indifferent gesture that nonetheless carried an indescribable confidence, as if helping me was a trivial matter of no consequence. "It's nothing. Everything is ready." His words made me even more confused. What everything was ready? I felt a mix of curiosity and a little worry, a vague premonition of what was about to happen. "What everything?" I asked, feeling utterly bewildered. My mind was still reeling from the deep sleep, unable to catch up with his mysterious words. Everything was ready? What did that mean? He stood up, with an impressive height, his figure tall and steady, like a towering skyscraper in the cramped space of the airplane cabin. "Let's get off the plane. I've arranged a car." His words were cold and decisive, allowing no objection. I felt a slight discomfort in my heart. What was he doing? How did he know I needed a car? How could he arbitrarily arrange everything without asking for my opinion? A feeling of being violated, of being controlled, began to creep into my mind. "I've already called a rideshare," I said, trying to maintain composure, trying to regain a bit of autonomy. I didn't want him to think I was a weak woman, easily manipulated. "I canceled it," he said decisively, his voice unwavering, as if it were an obvious and unchangeable decision. "My SUV is waiting. It will be more convenient for Leo." A feeling of both relief and wariness ran through me. Relieved that I didn't have to struggle with luggage and Leo through O'Hare's crowded, bustling terminal. Relieved that I didn't have to worry about finding my way or waiting. But at the same time, I felt extremely wary of his presumption. Who allowed him to do that? Who allowed him to cancel my ride and replace it with his car? I knew nothing about him, other than his name and his glamorous, mysterious appearance. Anxiety began to surge in my heart like a fierce wave, washing away the little peace I had just gained after sleep. At O'Hare, everything happened like a whirlwind. I was almost swept along by him, like a dry leaf in a hurricane. Nicholas seemed to know every corner, every shortcut, every unspoken rule of this vast airport. He led the way through security, where everyone else had to queue for a long time and wait, but we were strangely prioritized. He led me through this baggage claim area, where my luggage was neatly arranged, ready to be picked up. He didn't rush my steps, but he created a sense of urgency, an invisible pressure, as if everything had to proceed according to his plan, according to the schedule he had set. I carried Leo, trying to keep myself from getting lost amidst the passing crowds, amidst the noisy sounds and dazzling lights of the airport. I felt like a puppet being pulled by strings, and the string puller was Nicholas. Every action of mine had to follow his guidance. His control was not overt, but it seeped into every corner, every smallest detail of my life, making me feel like I was losing my autonomy, losing my right to decide. Outside the terminal, a gleaming black SUV was waiting, standing out among the rows of vehicles. The car looked very luxurious, with tinted windows and a powerful, authoritative appearance. A tall man, with a stern, expressionless face, opened the door for us. "Enzo," he said, was the driver. His voice was deep and decisive, his eyes quickly scanning me and Leo with an assessing look. I looked inside the car. An ISOFIX child seat was already installed, perfectly secured, as if it had been prepared a long time ago. Frighteningly perfect. Nicholas's level of preparation made me both grateful and shiver. How did he know I had a child? How did he know I needed a child seat? Had he investigated me? Or was he simply too thoughtful, too far-sighted? The questions kept swirling in my head, making me feel a vague fear. Who was this man? And why was he doing all of this for me? I placed Leo in the seat, carefully fastening the seatbelt, every movement of mine slow and steady, trying not to wake Leo. He stood there, saying nothing, but his eyes followed my every move, as if he was evaluating, checking. That gaze made me feel as if I was being scrutinized, exposed before a complete stranger. When Leo was settled, I turned to him, my eyes meeting his deep blue gaze. I really don't understand what's happening, I said, my voice a little shaky, almost a plea. Why are you doing all of this? I needed an answer, an explanation for all these strange things. He looked at me, his eyes deep, like a bottomless lake, unable to read any emotion. You're in trouble, Ava. I'm simply helping. His voice was deep and steady, as if it were an obvious truth. Helping? I repeated, trying to stay calm, trying not to let panic show. This isn't normal help. Who are you? I couldn't accept that simple explanation. His actions were too grand, too thoughtful, to be merely help. He didn't answer my question directly, once again evading the truth. You can trust me, he said, his gaze still calm, without a hint of wavering. I won't harm you and Leo. His words were like an assurance, but they couldn't dispel the doubt in my heart. I didn't know if I could trust him. Could his promise be reliable when he was such a mysterious person? But what other choice did I have? My mother was dying. I was utterly exhausted, no longer strong enough to fend for myself. I had reached my limit, standing on the brink of collapse. To my mother's house, I said to Enzo, my voice weak but decisive. Pilsen neighborhood. The SUV glided smoothly on the highway, taking us back to painful memories, to the old house and the worries that awaited. I held Leo, trying to forget the presence of the strange man beside me, trying not to let his scent envelop me, like a constant reminder of this strange intervention. But no matter how hard I tried, the scent of leather and sandalwood still haunted me, like an unshakable shadow. We arrived at my mother's house in Pilsen. I had expected an old, messy house as I had left it, with familiar items piled up and the characteristic musty smell of a long unoccupied home. But what I saw stunned me, almost making me disbelieve my own eyes. The front door was ajar, inviting me into a completely different space. Inside, the house seemed to have been cleaned and rearranged with astonishing neatness. Every corner, every item was wiped clean, in its place, as if an invisible hand had transformed it into a completely new place. Right in the living room, a brand new, pristine white bassinet had been set up, standing out in the familiar yet altered space. Next to it was a changing table, fully stocked with various diapers, wet wipes, baby lotion, all neatly and thoughtfully arranged. A gleaming bottle sterilizer, a modern bottle warmer, toys dangling from the bassinet, all brand new and never used. There was even a quietly operating air purifier and a smart baby monitor camera, installed in the corner of the room, blinking a small light, like an unblinking eye. Everything was brand new, arranged so perfectly that it made me feel overwhelmed and frightened. "What is this?" I exclaimed, almost breathless, feeling a chill run down my spine. I looked at Nicholas, my eyes filled with suspicion, anger, and a little fear. "What have you done?" My voice trembled, trying to stay calm but unable to. He had blatantly and presumptuously invaded my private space, my mother's space. "Just a few necessities for Leo," he said, his tone as calm as if discussing the weather, without any emotional expression. I thought the baby would need a comfortable space. His calmness made me even angrier. He was disregarding my feelings, disregarding my privacy. "This is too much," I said, feeling deeply violated. A feeling of helplessness surged within me. I didn't ask for these things. I didn't want him to do these things. I didn't want him to interfere in my life so excessively. Sometimes, people don't know what they need until it's already arranged, he replied, his gaze unwavering, still calm and inscrutable. You should focus on your mother. Leo will be well taken care of here. His words were like a sharp knife, reminding me of the harsh reality of the main reason I returned to Chicago. My mother. I had forgotten my mother for a moment because of all this, because of his excessive interference. I felt guilty and angry. Guilty for forgetting my mother, and angry that he had taken advantage of my weakness, my exhaustion. He had set a trap, and I had willingly stepped into it. Ava! A warm, familiar voice called from the kitchen. It was Mrs. Alvarez, my mother's neighbor, a kind Spanish woman, with silvery hair and a gentle smile, who always treated me like a daughter. She walked out, embracing me warmly, her arms warm and familiar. Welcome home, daughter. Leo has grown so big. She glanced at Nicholas, her eyes seeming to assess, mixed with a little curiosity. This is... She wanted an explanation. Nicholas Moretti, he introduced, extending his hand to shake hers, a polite and confident gesture. I am Ava's friend. Friend? Mrs. Alvarez raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. A very kind friend, young Nicholas. He helped me clean and prepare everything for baby Leo a few days ago. He even arranged a nanny to help Ava. Her words were like a punch to my stomach. Nanny? Even that he had arranged? His level of control exceeded my imagination. I felt like a young bird trapped in a cage, no matter how beautiful that cage was. I don't need a nanny, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to let my anger show. I can take care of Leo myself. I had always been independent. I didn't want to accept help from anyone, especially from a mysterious man like him. You have a lot to do at the hospital, Nicholas said, his voice brooking no argument, an absolute decisiveness. Don't worry about Leo. The nanny is very experienced. His words were like a stone pressing on my chest, taking my breath away. I wanted to scream, to object, to refuse all his arrangements. But I couldn't. My mother was waiting. My worry for my mother overshadowed all other emotions. I had to go to the hospital, had to be with my mother. I had no other choice but to accept his arrangements, even though I didn't want to. At Northwestern Hospital, the strong smell of disinfectant stung my nose, the characteristic hospital smell I had learned to detest. The whirring of machines, the steady beeping of the heart monitor, the hurried footsteps of nurses, all created a symphony of pain and anxiety. Cold white lights illuminated the hallway, highlighting tired faces and unspoken fears. I walked into my mother's room, my heart feeling constricted, as if an invisible hand was squeezing it tightly. My mother was emaciated, her skin pale, ashen like a white sheet, but her eyes still held a faint glimmer of light when she saw me and Leo. It was a glimmer of love, of hope, a fragile light that still existed. Ava. Leo. My mother's voice was weak, a whisper, almost inaudible, but still enough to melt my heart. I couldn't hold back my tears. Hot tears streamed down my cheeks, falling onto my mother's hospital gown. I hugged my mother, feeling her frail bones beneath the thin gown, feeling life slowly leaving her body. I'm home, Mom. I'm home, I whispered, trying to convey some strength, some hope from my warmth. Nicholas stood at the door, saying nothing, no empty words of comfort, no hurried gestures. He just stood there, like a shadow, a living statue, but his presence was very strong, very clear, like a solid wall. The head doctor, a middle-aged man with a stern face, walked into the room, looking at me and Nicholas with surprise, as if he hadn't expected us to be there together. Mr. Moretti requested Mrs. Gua. Hart, be transferred to a specialized ICU room and invited a leading expert from Mayo Clinic to assist, he told me, his voice carrying a hint of respect, a touch of awe when mentioning Nicholas's name. All expenses have been taken care of. We will do everything we can to save her. I looked at Nicholas, my eyes filled with tears, blurred by them. He had done this for my mother. He had given my mother the best chance, something I, with my meager funds, with my financial exhaustion, could never have done. My gratitude surged, so great that it choked me, yet mixed with a vague fear, an indescribable unease. Was he buying me? What did he want from me? What made him willing to spend such a large sum of money for a complete stranger? The following days passed like a nightmare, a long series of worries, of endless hours of waiting. I stayed at the hospital almost all day, holding my mother's hand tightly, whispering old stories, words of encouragement, words of love I had never had the chance to say. Nicholas visited frequently, appearing quietly, without fuss. He brought me hot coffee, light meals I had forgotten I needed, or simply sat there, silently reading, like a silent companion. He didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, didn't try to comfort me with empty words. But his presence brought a strange sense of security, an invisible reassurance I had never felt before. I found myself starting to rely on him, on his calmness and his ability to solve every problem. Everything related to my mother, from upgrading her room to a more luxurious, comfortable one, to finding rare medications unavailable at the hospital, was handled by him quickly and efficiently, as if he had an invisible force behind him. The doctors and nurses all showed him special respect, their eyes for him not just ordinary respect, but also awe, a silent deference. I felt myself being drawn into a vortex, a world I didn't understand, a world created by him. One afternoon, I went home to rest a bit, trying to regain my strength after long days at the hospital. When I walked in, Mrs. Alvarez was playing with Leo in the living room, the baby's giggles suddenly making the house warmer and more lively. Leo giggled, waving her arms and legs, her eyes shining with joy. Leo's bedroom, the pristine white crib Nicholas had prepared, the smart baby monitor camera blinking a small light, like an unblinking eye. Young Nicholas is very thoughtful, Ava, Mrs. Alvarez said as I walked in, her voice warm, mixed with a hint of admiration. He took care of everything, even hiring a young girl to help you, she said with a radiant smile, as if Nicholas was a god descended to earth. Yes, I know, I said, my voice dry, feeling a discomfort creeping into my heart. I was grateful, truly grateful for what he had done. But I was also afraid. His protection seemed limitless, and with it came a growing sense of control. I felt bound, trapped in a debt of gratitude I didn't know how to repay. I didn't know if he was saving me, or slowly chaining me to a life I didn't want. That evening, I stood by the window, looking out at the familiar streets of the Pilsen neighborhood. Old brick houses, small shops sparkling with neon lights, all evoked childhood memories. I suddenly saw a black car, the same type of SUV as Nicholas's, parked a short distance from the house, like a shadow in the night. It was Nicholas's SUV. And Enzo was sitting in it, his eyes fixed on my house, like a hawk guarding its prey. He was guarding. I felt a chill run down my spine. A shiver, an obvious truth I had tried to deny for so long. I no longer had any doubt. Leo and I were being watched. I was being protected, but at the same time, I was also being controlled. The golden cage he had created for me was slowly closing, little by little, and I felt myself losing my freedom, losing my right to choose. The safety he provided came with a price, and I was beginning to feel that price was too high. My mother passed away on an early August morning, as the first rays of sunlight just broke through, painting the Chicago sky pink. I sat by her bed, holding her hand tightly, feeling her last breath leave her frail body. My heart felt shattered, as if a sharp piece of glass had just pierced through it. Leo was sleeping in my arms, unaware of my pain, unaware of this immense loss. That pain was too great, too much to bear for a daughter, too much for me to carry alone. I felt myself slowly sinking into an abyss of despair, with no way out. Nicholas appeared, silently like a ghost. He said nothing, no empty words of comfort, no hurried gestures. He just gently took Leo from my arms, his hand steady and warm, bringing a strange comfort. He whispered something to Leo in Italian, a language I didn't understand, but his voice carried a strange tenderness, a softness I had never seen in him. Then he turned to me, his eyes full of sympathy, yet maintaining an indescribable calmness. "Let me take care of everything," he said, his voice deep and certain, like an unbreakable promise. "You should rest." And he did exactly as he said. He handled all the funeral arrangements, from choosing a luxurious funeral home in Lake Forest, where I never thought I would have enough money to hold a service for my mother, to arranging the ceremony. Every smallest detail was perfectly taken care of by him. He stood beside me, like a solid wall, shielding me from the storm of opinions from my mother's family, distant relatives who suddenly appeared to share their sorrow and demand. He was a solid wall between me and the outside world, a strange man who had become my only support during the darkest days I thought I couldn't get through. He bore every burden, every responsibility, so I could focus on my pain, so I could grieve fully. A few days after the funeral, when everything had temporarily settled down, Nicholas invited me to dinner. A luxurious restaurant in downtown Chicago, with dim lights, sparkling wine glasses reflecting candlelight, and soft, melodious jazz music, creating a romantic yet mysterious atmosphere. I wore a simple black dress, the only outfit I had kept from my working days, feeling out of place in this overly lavish setting among glamorous women and elegant men. I felt like Cinderella lost in a palace, a complete contrast to the surrounding glamour. "Ava," he began, placing his wine glass on the table, his eyes looking straight at me, a rare seriousness. "There's something I need to tell you." My heart pounded, a feeling of unease rising within me. I felt a bad omen, a premonition of what was about to be revealed. The Moretti family doesn't only operate legal businesses, he said, his voice deep and steady, without any emotional expression. "We also have off-the-books activities." The phrase "off the books" echoed in my head, cold and terrifying. Mafia? Was that what he was implying? I had guessed something shady, a connection to the underworld, but the phrase "off the books" carried a completely different meaning, a much rawer and more terrifying truth. "What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice hoarse, almost unable to believe my ears. He looked at me, his gaze not avoiding mine, without a hint of remorse or apprehension. "Simply put, we are an influential family in Chicago, and that influence is not limited to the business world." His words were like a knife stabbing straight into my heart, severing the last thread of hope. A cold fear ran through me, a primal and instinctive fear. Had I relied on a man like this? Had I entrusted Leo to a man involved in the underworld, in illegal activities? I had pushed myself and my son into a danger I knew nothing about. "I understand what you're thinking," he said, as if reading my thoughts, as if he could see through my heart. "But I want you to know, I always ensure the safety of those I care about." His words did not soothe my fear at all. On the contrary, they increased my unease. He wanted me to trust him, but how could I trust a man who had just confessed to being involved in crime? Then, he pulled out a small black velvet box from his vest pocket. Inside was a sparkling diamond ring, the diamond so large it stunned me, radiating brilliant light under the dim restaurant lights. "Ava," he said, his voice serious, without a hint of jest. "Marry me." The proposal was so unexpected, so sudden, that it made me feel like I was dreaming. I looked at the ring, then into his eyes, trying to find some expression, some emotion in his deep blue gaze. "A proposal? What is this?" I scoffed, a bitter, sarcastic laugh. "A business deal?" "A business deal, in a way," he admitted, his gaze still calm and inscrutable. "A marriage, in name only. In exchange for security, finances, and the Moretti name for Leo, she will be protected, we'll have a stable future, a family. His words were like an attractive offer, a way out of all the difficulties I was facing, but also a dangerous trap. I was silent. In that moment, thousands of thoughts raced through my head, like a storm in my mind. My life, Leo's life. Mounting debts, utter exhaustion, fear of an uncertain future. And now, a way out. A way out enveloped by a dangerous world, by a mysterious man, by secrets and power I knew nothing about. A way out I couldn't refuse, but also couldn't accept blindly. I felt I was standing at a crossroads, a choice that could completely change my life and Leo's. Why? I asked, my voice weak, almost inaudible. Why me? Why Leo? I needed a reason, a logical explanation for all these strange things. He looked at me, a flicker of emotion crossed his eyes, a light I had never seen before, a rare softness. You and Leo. You are a strong woman, Ava. And Leo. Leo awakened something in me, a protective instinct. Protective instinct? Or possession? I didn't know. I couldn't tell the difference. But I knew I couldn't agree blindly. I needed to protect myself and my son. I needed to ensure that I wasn't being taken advantage of, wasn't being drawn into a world I didn't belong to. I have 4 conditions, I said, my voice becoming stronger, more resolute, trying to regain some control, even if just a little. If you want me to agree, you must accept these. I would not let myself be pushed into a passive situation. He nodded, his gaze still calm, signaling me to continue. First, I began, looking straight into his eyes, trying not to let my fear show. Leo is number 1. Every decision you make must prioritize her best interests. Nothing is more important than her. That was the prerequisite, unshakable. I agree, he said immediately, without hesitation. Second, I continued, feeling a little more confident. I need a separate bank account, which I fully control. No interference from you or anyone else. My money is my money. I needed financial independence. I didn't want to be dependent on him. He nodded. Reasonable. Third, I said, feeling a little shaky. This was the hardest condition to state. No sharing a bed. At least not until I feel comfortable, until I actively want it. This is a marriage on paper. Nothing more, nothing less. No forced intimacy. I needed my privacy. I needed respect. He looked at me for a long time, his gaze probing, as if considering, evaluating. I thought he would object, would refuse this condition, but in the end, he just nodded. I understand. And finally, I said, no lies, no secrets between us. I need transparency. I need to know what I'm getting into. I didn't want to live in deceit, in concealment. Nicholas Moretti, that powerful and mysterious man, looked at me, a slight smile appearing on his lips, a rare and enigmatic smile. Ava Hart, he said, you are the only woman who has ever set conditions with me. He extended his hand strong and warm. I agree. I looked at his hand, then at the sparkling diamond ring on the table. A marriage on paper, in exchange for safety and a future for Leo. A deal with the devil, or a life raft? I didn't know. I only knew that I had made a decision that could completely change my life. My mother's funeral was held at a private cemetery in Lake Forest, a beautiful and peaceful place, with lush green trees and carefully tended graves. But also so luxurious that it made me feel out of place, like an outsider at my own mother's funeral. I stood there, in a black dress, holding Leo in my arms, trying to keep myself from crying. Nicholas stood beside me, one hand gently placed on my back, a gesture both comforting and possessive, a silent affirmation of his place beside me. He spoke with those who came to pay their respects, introducing Leo as our son, so naturally it was terrifying, as if it were an obvious truth. Everyone looked at us with respectful eyes, some with curiosity, others with envy. He was a natural father, a perfect picture of a happy family, a picture I knew was just a facade, an elaborate staging. I felt like I was playing a role I didn't want at all. Amidst the crowd, I saw Mrs. Alvarez. She came over to me, taking my hand warmly, her eyes looking at me with worry and love. "Ava, my daughter," she whispered, her voice warm and thoughtful. "You have made a big decision." She glanced at Nicholas, her eyes seeming to assess, then turned back to me, as if wanting to convey an important message. "Safety always comes with a price, my dear. Never forget that." Her words were like a warning, a bell echoing in my mind, reminding me of the price I was paying, of what I had traded. I knew she was right. I knew I was trading something, but I didn't know how much it cost, and whether I could afford to pay it. Was the safety Nicholas provided worth trading my freedom for? 3 days later, in my mother's living room, the house had been thoroughly cleaned. No trace of clutter or mustiness remained, but it was still haunted by memories, by the laughter and tears I had experienced in this place. Nicholas sat opposite me, on my mother's old armchair, his gaze patient, without any haste or coercion. He waited, like a cat stalking its prey, knowing that the prey would eventually walk into the trap itself. "I've thought a lot," I said, my voice hoarse, feeling as if I had just gone through an internal battle. "About what you proposed. I had considered, struggled, cried a lot, but in the end, I knew I had no other choice." He said nothing, just waited, his gaze still calm and inscrutable. I agree," I said, almost unable to utter the words, each word a heavy burden. "I agree to this marriage in name only. For Leo. For Leo. That was the only reason. For my son, I accepted stepping into a life I didn't want, with a man I didn't know." A slight smile appeared on his lips, a triumphant smile, yet also with an indescribable tenderness. He stood up, walked over to me, his steps light yet powerful. "You won't regret it, Ava," he said, his voice deep and certain, like a prophecy. "You chose correctly." He took out a white gold necklace, with a tiny, exquisitely carved key-shaped pendant, the metal gleaming under the lights. "This is my gift," he said, gently placing it around my neck. I felt the cool touch of the metal on my skin, a feeling both strange and familiar. It symbolizes a promise of a safe world and a future for our child. The pendant had tiny engraved letters. I squinted to read. "To my world, Chicago 2024. His world. Or our world." After that, we got into the car. The black SUV once again. But this time, the destination was not the old house in Pilsen, not the cold hospital or the peaceful cemetery, but a luxurious penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, with panoramic views of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline, sparkling with lights. I carried Leo. She was sleeping soundly in my arms, unaware of the great change in her life. I looked out the window, the scenery flashing by like a fast-forwarded film. My life had completely changed, in an unexpectedly short period, in just a few days. We walked into the penthouse. The spacious apartment, decorated modernly and elegantly, with art paintings and expensive furniture. Everything was splendid and perfect, like a dream I had never dared to imagine. A room had been prepared for Leo, a dreamlike nursery, fully equipped with toys and amenities, with pastel-colored walls and soft stuffed animals. I placed Leo on the bed, kissed her forehead, my heart filled with a complex emotion, both loving and worried. I stood by the window, looking out at the sparkling lights of Chicago City, a vibrant and lively picture. I had chosen safety. I had chosen a stable future for Leo. I had accepted the price Nicholas offered. But what was the price of this safety? Had I traded my freedom to step into a golden cage, a luxurious but controlled life? Was I truly saved, or merely imprisoned in a life I couldn't control, a life I didn't want? The key on my neck, cool and heavy. It was Nicholas's promise, a promise of safety and future, but also a symbol of control, of a life bound. I didn't know if I could open the door of this golden cage, or if I would forever be trapped in it, living a life someone else had chosen for me. I only knew that, from now on, my life, and Leo's life, were tied to Nicholas Moretti, to the Moretti name, and to all the secrets and power it brought. I hoped I had made the right choice. I hoped that my sacrifice would bring a good future for Leo, but only time would tell. And I, an exhausted single mother, now the wife of an underworld boss, would have to live with that choice, every day, every hour, every minute, in ceaseless anticipation.